Okay, it's time to talk about some more functional groups. Not all functional groups are related to oxygen. There are some functional groups with nitrogens in them. So the first major nitrogen functional group is an amine, and it just has the nitrogen in it. The thing is, the amines have three different varieties. Okay, there are primary amines, which are going to have a single carbon bond and have two hydrogens attached to it. There's secondary amines, which are going to have two carbon bonds with only one hydrogen attached to it, and then tertiary amines, which have three carbons and no hydrogens. Okay, so to kind of give you a picture of what they look like down at the bottom, but honestly I remember primary sounds like one, so that should have one carbon. Secondary sounds like two, that should have two carbons. Tertiary, even though tert means four, it still kind of sounds like tri, so I think of that as three carbons. Okay? So, when naming primary amines, the ones that just have a single bond, okay, you use the prefix for the number of carbons that is attached. So you count your chain, you add the ending -amine. Okay? And then, usually because this comes as the last part when I do my naming, you do need to indicate where it falls on the carbon chain. Because the amine group can fall in the middle, like in this 3-octaamine, or it can fall at the end. Okay? The only time you're going to be able to get away with not labeling it is going to be for 1 and 2 carbon chains, so methanamine or ethanamine, because methanamine, there's only one place to put it. Ethanamine, regardless, it's going to be on the outside, so it's going to start with your first carbon. But hitting propanamine and above, you will need to include a number indicating where the nitrogen group falls. So primary amines are the easiest amine to name. Secondary amines. Okay? There's two kind of situations you'll run into with a secondary amine. There's going to be two carbon chains attached to your nitrogen. They could end up being the exact same chains. Okay, you could have two identical chains like in this first one. There's two carbons attached on both sides, so two eth groups. Okay, when that happens, instead of writing out each one separately, you're going to use the prefix di to represent 2. Okay, so that equals 2. Then you're going to count the numbers to get your number prefix. Okay, in this case, there's 2 carbons, so eth. Then you add YL to the end of your number, so diethyl. And then at the end, you add amine to the end. Not anamine, but just amine. Okay, so that's a little bit different when you have these symmetric secondary and when we get to it, tertiary amines. Now, if the amine is surrounded by different chains, then the shorter chain is going to have this formatting at the beginning. N-ethyl and methyl and propyl. Okay, so the capital letter N dash your number prefix with the ending YL. Okay, so like this one, your N has 2 carbons on this side and then 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons on the other side. You use the N portion with the shorter chain. Okay, and then the longer chain gets named like primary amines. 1-butanamine. Okay, so it's more, you have the primary, you sit there and you have kind of the primary amine name plus what's attached to the other side of the nitrogen. Okay. Another example of that one is this one where we have 1 carbon attached on one side and then 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons attached on the other side, but it's in a different setup than the one before. So it's N-methyl for the 1 carbon, and then because it's on the second carbon of the butyl group, it's 2-butanamine. Okay, so the anamine comes back when you have the different chains. And then tertiary amines are kind of complicated, like the secondary amines. If you have 3 attachments that are all the same, Okay, then you would add tri for 3, and then the number prefix. In this case, this one is 3 methyl groups, so trimethylamine. Okay, so there's no, everything is symmetrical, you don't need that anamine, you can just say amine at the end. When you have 2 things that are the same and one that's different, the 2 things you can do with this formatting N comma N dash dimethyl, the 2 things that are the same. Okay, so that's these 2. And then the number where your nitrogen falls on the other chain, and then the formatting like a single hydrogen, or a single nitrogen amine, 2-pentanamine. Okay? Or you can run into things where everything is different, and then you indicate the things that we're saying are attached to the nitrogen as N-ethyl, which is this part, and N-methyl, which is this part. Okay, so in this case, the N groups are written in alphabetical order. Okay. That is a rule that we will follow. But the N groups are written in alphabetical order, and then the long chain, the third component that's the longest, gets the number where the N falls. So in this case, it falls on the 3rd carbon. The prefix related to the number of carbons in the chain, hept, and then anamine. Okay? These are all pretty closely tied to each other. I know when you get to having these opposite things kind of connected together, it gets a little bit more complicated. But it's actually prepping you for when we start talking about branching anyway. So for these, try naming or drawing the structure. So pause the video, see if you can get them, and then turn it back on and I'll show you what you should have. Alright, so when it comes to amines, you gotta look at what's attached to the nitrogen. Okay, this one is a tertiary amine because there are 3 carbon chains attached. Okay, I have a methyl group, a 1, 2, 3 propyl group, and a 1, 2, 3, 4 butyl group. Okay, the longest one I'm going to use at the end. So the 2 shorter ones, the methyl and the methyl and propyl groups, I'm going to attach the ends to. So I'm going to have N. Which one should I do first, methyl or propyl? Hoping you said methyl, because alphabetical order. N-methyl, and propyl. And then the nitrogen is at the beginning of my butanamide. Okay. So in this case, the N's are kind of like a number. Okay, they're not words, so that's why they have the dashes separating it from the words. Okay. Alright, when I see this name, I'm seeing NN, which tells me that there are going to be chains on my carbon, and specifically there's going to be 2 of them. Then it says diethyl, so that means there's 2 ethyl groups, so they're going to be the same. And then there's going to be on a 3rd carbon of a pent or 5 carbon chain, my N. So I'm going to have N, and I'm going to add my long chain at the bottom first. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then my ethyl groups, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, as far as shape goes, if things are a little reversed, especially your ethyl groups, that's fine. You just got to make sure that you remember that where the line connects to the N, there isn't a carbon there. Okay. Let's see. Next one, I have 1 hydrogen, so that tells me I'm definitely going to have a secondary carbon, or secondary nitrogen. And then I've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 2 of the exact same thing attached to it, so that means I have a dipropyl amine. Okay? I don't need numbering unless the substituents attached to the end are actually different from each other. And then last one, I have a bunch of NH2s, which means these are all going to be primary amines. So that's easier to name. I just need to count up my carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have a hept. And then my ending's going to be anamine. And then I just need to indicate where they are. So if I go count this way, I've got 1, 2, 3, oops, skipped a carbon there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I can just tell if I go the other way, I won't be starting from 1. So I've got a nitrogen at 1. I have a nitrogen group at 6 and at 7 in my dash. And then there shouldn't be a space there. I just started writing too early. Okay? Alright, the only other nitrogen-based functional group we're going to talk about is an amide instead of an amine, which has a nitrogen and a double bonded oxygen on the exact same carbon. Okay? So, these can sometimes happen at the end, like in methanamide, or whenever they do happen at the end, then you don't have to really write anything funky with it. Like if it was at the end of a propyl group, you could say propanamide. Okay? But nitrogen has room for extra bonding sites, so sometimes you have to use formatting like we did for the secondary and tertiary amines. Okay? So when you have two things bonded to it, the part attached to the nitrogen, this time regardless of size, the part attached to the nitrogen without the carbon that has the oxygen, okay, those get the N attachment. Okay, so N-ethyl, and then we have a 1, 2, 3, 4 butanamide. So looking at the next one, alright, this time we have two chains coming off our nitrogen. Got an ethyl group, methyl group, and then an ethyl group. Okay? But I want you to look at this one carefully. Some things are right in the name, but something's wrong. See if you can spot the mistake. Hopefully you notice that we do have the N-ethyl and N-methyl. Those are in alphabetical order. That's good. But if you double check your carbon count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the end should be pentanamide. Okay? So, again, hoping that these occasional mistakes make it so that you don't make mistakes. So, make sure you do the online quiz, and I will see you in class.